All right, everybody, welcome in to a chat between 24/7 Sports and West Virginia coach Neal Brown. Coach Brown, thanks so much for coming on here with us today.
Glad to do it, and hopefully we can get through as the fan questions as we can.
No doubt. So, speaking of those fan questions, we're just going to lead off here. This first one comes from Chris in Gassaway, West Virginia, and he says, "Coach, you've really invested a lot of time into the players, not only on the field but off the field. Why is the fifth quarter program so important to you and to the entire program?"
Well, I think one of the things we do well here, and one of the things we did well at Troy, and really something that we always talk about environmental principles, and we talk about a family atmosphere, and really what that means is relationships. And relationships are built on love, care, and trust. And I think that, our job as coaches is to really take a guy from like where he's at currently when we get him to where he potentially can be. We got to be able to close that gap. And the only way you can really do that with today's student athletes is if you build relationships that allow you to push them. And to be able to push them, they have to understand that you care about them more than just a football player. And so the fifth quarter program is really about us developing what we call a whole person. We want to be a developmental program. That's an avenue to develop our guys off the field. The other thing too, and this is probably, I haven't spoken publicly on this a lot, but, I think, we have an issue, and I've heard Dr. Gee talk about this. I hear Dr. Gee talk about this a bunch, is, so much of our talent, and what I mean by that, brain power, is leaving the state. And this fifth quarter program is an opportunity through the career development piece is to really align some of our student athletes with businesses and corporations that are here in West Virginia. And so it's an opportunity for us as a program also, not only to grow our student athletes, but also to give back and hopefully put some productive workforce back into our state.
Absolutely. I think, generally when we think fifth quarter program, right, we think on field, right, pushing through that fourth quarter into fifth. But I think it's neat how you're incorporating, off the field there as well, both, psychologically and academically. Our next one comes from Derek in Petersburg, West Virginia. He says, "Coach, how much of an impact development-wise do you think the current situation will have on this year's team and the future teams? Is it safe to say that the veteran-based team can maneuver the situation better or the youth can adapt better?"
Well, it's going to impact every team. There's just a lot of unknowns. There really is. I do think it'll impact every team. We've stayed consistent with our messaging to our players. Most of our fans have heard it. Talked about health and wellness. We've talked about routine schedule. We've talked about culture of accountability, and we've really hammered those. And I think we've had a really good plan about how we've taught and what our expectations are whenever that return to play is. It's our intent to create an edge. How it's going to impact our program, I don't know. I really don't, but I do think it's going to have an impact on everyone's program. But does it affect youth, veteran teams? My hope would be that since we're going into year two and our culture and really what our expectations are for our players, they've been, we've been able to establish those. So I hope we have an edge over some of the other teams we're playing, but that's to be seen.
It's just a little follow-up on that. Mm-hmm. I've been asking a lot of coaches this when I interview them. If I told you, Coach, if I told you back in February, hey, for about a 100-day period starting in mid-March, you're not going to have your guys on campus. So it's going to limit your spring practice, right? You're not going to be able to see them at all. It's not like, hey, they can't come to the university. It's like you're not going to see them in person at all. What's one thing that maybe you wouldn't have thought about that has proven to be more of a challenge than you would have maybe thought? And then what's the one thing that you thought, wow, this is going to be almost impossible that you've been able to overcome?
Well, it would have been such a foreign theory to me then. I don't know how I responded. I'll say this is I think the level of football learning or teaching we've been able to do has been something that's really stuck out to me. I actually think our guys may be attaining more football knowledge, overall understanding of our schemes and our concepts, and then just a better understanding of football in general in all three phases because we're meeting with them more. You know, the NCAA and the football oversight allowed us up to 8 hours. Now we don't use that many, but that's more than we're getting, you know, football time. Like right now, if we were under normal rules, we'd only have 2 hours of film work with our guys. Right. You know, there have been time in May where we had 0. So I do think that that's a side of it. And then the recruiting stuff is fun. You know, it's like, you know, the creativity is yet to probably stop as far as you can't take your product or they can't come see your product. So you got to take your product to them. That's been another aspect that all the virtual stuff is something I probably wouldn't have anticipated.
And I'm sure that's something that, at least on some level, you guys anticipate, you know, continuing to use some before kids can actually get on campus and, you know, and see with the virtual visit concepts.
Yeah, we definitely will. That's for sure. The virtual visits is something that we'll continue to do. That's something that we're evolving with. We've been doing them for, I don't know, maybe a month now. And that's something that's going to continue to evolve for us. And it's a great tool, especially for those student athletes that are great distance away from our campus.
Awesome. Coach, you guys have a pretty big opening game this year against Florida State in the Falcons Dome there. And our next question is actually from Neal as well. Pretty cool name. Neal from Mercer County. And he asks, with a new coaching staff coming into Florida State, have you and your staff been burning the midnight oil watching a lot of Memphis game film? Obviously, Coach Mike Norvell of Florida State having come from Memphis last year.
Yeah, we've been watching a good amount of Memphis. Watched Memphis film for schemes, and then watching really on offense and defense, watching more Maryland schemes on special teams. That's where the special teams coordinator came from. Watching a little bit of Memphis special teams, but and then watching the Florida State for personnel. And that's what, you know, we're going to look at the schemes, but we really got to pay attention to personnel because we're going to be playing against the players, not the coaches. And they've got some impressive personnel. You know, the Tamorian Terry is a wideout that's really, really talented. We've got a grad transfer tight end that's a definite threat. They've got 2 D linemen. I think they're maybe 3 they're going to be NFL draft picks. They're talented in the secondary. So we've been watching Memphis schematically, but paying a lot of attention to the personnel that's already at Florida State.
You mentioned the defensive line there at FSU. Obviously, I saw a couple of publications have them as the number 1 defensive tackle position in the country. Not that it keeps you up at night, but that's obviously something that has to be on your mind going to that game. How you find those creative solutions to get those guys blocked so you can, you know, be effective running pass.
Yeah, there's no doubt. We're going to have to be creative. They're probably going to be more talented and more experienced than we are in the interior of the offensive line. But if you go back and look at all the guys we played against last year, we played against a lot of draft picks, you know, from starting at Missouri, really on through our whole Missouri, NC State, and then through the Big 12. The Big 12 is really talented defensive line last year. That's not something that's getting a whole lot of play nationally, but we played against a lot of really good interior defensive linemen.
Absolutely. Oklahoma's Gallimore and then, you know, Blaylock at TCU and a lot of those guys. You're right. That didn't get much play, but that was probably an up year within the conference.
Well, you got those guys. Then you've got K-State's got a defensive end, Hubert, that's still there. That's a stud. You got the 2 kids at Baylor, plus the nose at Baylor was I can't remember if he was a late round pick or a free agent. You got the kid at Iowa State who played nose, who's a really good player. I mean, and you know, the kid from Missouri was a draft pick. The defensive end from NC State was drafted. So we played against a lot of talented guys, and I'm not trying to undersell Florida State. I think they're going to be really good in the interior part of the defensive line, but we played against a lot of talented guys last year as well. No doubt.
So with the quarantine and everybody work from home, been able to spend a little more time with the family, and this next question concerns that. So Kayla from Martinsburg asks, how do Brooke and the kids like the transition from Alabama to West Virginia?
You know, it's been a good transition for my kids. It really has. It's they enjoyed their activities. So both my daughters are involved in softball. My middle child, Ansley, she's involved in soccer. Softball programs are really solid here. Soccer programs are really well done. And the school systems here have been great, very diverse, which doesn't get talked about a whole lot. But the schools where my girls go and where my son will go next year are really diverse. So we've enjoyed that as parents. But it has. Brooke has really enjoyed. We like college towns, and this is a great college town. We live out toward the lake, and it's beautiful this time of year.
So Ryan from Imperial, Pennsylvania, gets right to the point. He says, "Coach, what are some of the things you've most enjoyed since moving to Morgantown, outside of the bigger paycheck, of course?" So he's
well, some of those things some of the things,
yeah.
The difference in the summer weather. Now the winter weather, I'm still getting used to. I'm a little soft on the winter, but the summer is, end of May, June, July. We like it here. It's, the people are outstanding too. Some of the nicest people in the world are right here in Morgantown. And then going back to some of the stuff that we already talked about, the school system and some of the kids' activities.
So Chris from Morgantown has a question about uniforms, and he says, Troy seemed to have a lot of alternate jerseys and helmets in your time there. Do you think it's possible we'll see any alternate styles for West Virginia in the foreseeable future?
Yeah, it's always funny to me. It's uniforms are such a hot button issue that, it's at Troy we were really creative. I think we had 4 uniform combos there. We had a white, a lead, a black, and a cardinal. We had 3 different helmets. We changed up our helmets a good bit as far as from year to year. There with with a different apparel company there. There's a little bit more latitude. We didn't have as much of a traditional look. When we came in, we changed the use of logos, and so here we're more tradition oriented, which I don't think is a negative. It just our uniform combination is more traditional. Our fans are really passionate about being traditional. There's not as much flexibility with the apparel company we have right now as far as alternate uniforms and things like that. We're always looking to, and I'll tell you the other thing that's changed a little bit is with helmets, there's a few more safety guidelines as far as being able to change. And those have been over the last 12, 18 months. So that takes away some of your flexibility. I think there's always a fine line between traditional and being innovative, and so we want to continue to really honor our tradition and the look that our fans over the years have really enjoyed, while also trying to cater to that age group that's playing and we're recruiting. And so it's we're in the process of trying to look at different ways to do that.
No doubt. So Charles from Kaiser, West Virginia, actually has 2. His first one, what are some of the positives for the team to come from this current situation that may be overlooked? I think you already covered that largely with the players having a greater knowledge of scheme with the 8 hours available as opposed to just the 2. So we'll go ahead and jump to Charles' second question. He says, Coach, with recruiting in a weird time, are there recruiting or scouting changes your staff is making to try and attract the best student athletes to Almost Heaven?
Yeah, the virtual visits, which we hit earlier. We're trying to take, I tell them all the time, you can't come the country, you can't take the country roads to West Virginia, so we're taking our country roads to you. And so that's been the biggest development as far as recruiting. And then the process has just sped up so much, which will be interesting to follow as the year progresses, which I know 247 will be doing that. But I would say that would be probably the biggest change is all the virtual stuff.
You mentioned that the process being sped up. I'm actually the guy that updates our numbers every day as far as comparing the number of commitments this time of year to what they were last time of year. As of this morning, 950 kids for the class of 2021 committed. Last year on the same date, 405. So,
well, I think it's a combination of both, and I'll talk about that. I know it's not, but I think that's an interesting thing. And so, I think there's a few reasons for that. I think the power of social media. I think that there's greater peer pressure and greater communication between recruits now than ever before, especially because we're on social media or we're on video games or we're on other media types more because there's less to do. There's not school, there's not workouts, all those type of things. So I think that's a partly reason for it. I think some universities are really pressuring guys into making some decisions maybe earlier. And I think guys are – some of these commitments, they're more reservations than commitments, and so they're trying to hold on to their spot because people are filling up and they want to at least, it's not necessarily they're making their final decision. They're making the decision that they think is the best for them at this time. And so really the way we're going about it is we haven't taken somebody's commitment that hadn't been on campus yet. I'm not saying we won't because it's evolving, and the more you do virtually and the better you get to know kids and the longer this dead period is going through August now. So I don't really think we'll be able to hold on to that hard line fact. But I do think we need that. What we're trying to do is make sure the guys we have in the boat are really in the boat. And you're never going to be 100% with that, but you're trying to ask all the right questions and make sure that they're fully invested and committed and want to be part of of what we're building here. But I think we got a record number of commitments right now in college football, and I think somebody will be talking in December about the record number of decommitments that happened as well. So it'll be interesting.
We're counting on all that web traffic that'll come to our website when we have maybe 1,000 decommitments this year. Last year we had almost 700. You're not alone, by the way, in the stance of not taking commitments from players, who haven't at least visited campus or maybe had a prior relationship with your staff. We had Clay Helton at USC, and then also Mike Norvell, the opposing coach in y'all's opening game, and they both echoed the same sentiments to us. Said, hey, we don't want to take kids who we don't feel are going to be seriously committed to us, and they're just trying to, take a spot. And they've actually turned down some kids who have asked, hey, I want to commit, and they're like, are we the second or third school you asked to commit to today? This is maybe not what we're looking to take. So I think that's a smart approach, but not all schools follow that, certainly, and some have taken quite a few kids who have not yet visited campus, and we'll have to see what their hit rate is as far as retaining those commits. Another recruiting-related question here. This one comes from Jamie in Knoxville. And Jamie asks, what do you consider the most important aspect about a player's character when recruiting?
Well, anytime you're evaluating intangibles, it's difficult. And we could probably do a whole Q&A just on that, or a podcast or whatever, just on, evaluating, intangibles. It's difficult. What we try to do is we try to evaluate once we get locked in on, we go through, it's a pretty simple process. Can they play? That's a yes or no. They can play. They're good enough to play Power 5, Big 12 football. All right. If the answer to the first question is yes, they're good. They can play. Then it goes academically. Are they going to qualify? Can they be successful at West Virginia University? If the answer is yes to that question, then it goes the third question: are they the right kind of guy that we want in our program? And so, if the first question is no, then you don't proceed. If the answer is second question, you don't proceed. All right. And so they got to be able to play. They got to be academically be able to be successful here before we start really evaluating the intangibles. And what we try to do is we try to evaluate through our core values, which are discipline, accountability, hard work, integrity, toughness. That's mental and physical toughness, and then confidence. And we try to evaluate them. And we do that in multiple different ways. It's by in-person evaluations of practice. It's by talking to people within the school or within their family, or when they come on campus, talking to their player host, talking to the person that did the tour with them. Anybody they come in contact with, we're always asking questions that go back to these core values that we think are really, really important and what we're trying to develop in our guys.
No doubt. So, Coach, I think you like this next question from Mike in Columbus. Just having watched your time at Troy and then obviously your first year at West Virginia, I know you like to use the tight end and the fullback and the H-backs more than maybe some of the guys you learned from. And Mike in Columbus asks, West Virginia opponents have converted red zone and crucial third down possessions by throwing to their tight ends. I don't know about that, but apparently Mike in Columbus does. Do you plan to utilize that position more in your offense?
Yeah, it's there's some strong tight end proponents out there. I am too. The hard part about tight ends is most of the time they're playing power forwards on people's basketball teams, and they're hard to find. we do feel like that we've got two younger guys in our program that have developed, and Michael O'Loughlin and TJ Banks. Mike got really pressed into duty last year and probably played a lot before he was ready. I think he'll be one of the most improved players on our football team. I think TJ Banks is a guy that's made a lot of improvement, and he's got solid ability both as a blocker and as a pass catcher. He's got great hands. So I do think that there'll be a bigger piece of what we're doing. And red zone scoring was a deficiency of ours last year. There's no hiding that. And I do think the tight ends are an answer to help us score touchdowns in the red zone, which we have to do if we want to be an improved football team.
Coach, why do you believe in the tight end so much? And I know a lot of coaches, they say, hey, it's tough to develop tight ends early because they have to learn, the receiving game like a receiver would, but also enough of the blocking scheme, almost like an offensive lineman would. How do you help ease that transition for them?
Well, tight end is the hardest in any offense. Tight end position is the hardest to learn because you've really got to play three positions. You got to know everything the offensive line does. You got to be able to block in the run game from down on the line of scrimmage. You got to be able to know what the fullbacks do, which a lot of times same as running backs do, blocking from the if you're backed up off the ball. And then you got to know the routes and all the techniques that go along with that if you're going to split out or you're going to run routes. So it's a tough position. And most of the time, I think those are guys that are tough covers just because I like to say they're open by birth. Like TJ and Mike are both 6'4", 6'5" guys, and they're going to get covered by, a linebacker or a nickel or a safety that most of the time are at the high end or in that 6 foot to 6'2" area. So they've got long arms and most of the time those guys have basketball backgrounds and they got good ball skills.
Awesome. All right. So next questions come from Bryson in Lexington, Kentucky. He says, first, how has the Big 12 changed since you last coached with Texas Tech? How have defenses and offenses evolved in the conference since 2010?
Yeah, I think it's totally different. It really is. There's been a ton of coaching turnover. I think this is a really talented league for coaches. We got multiple national champions in this as head coaches. I think that there's some really innovative minds where a lot of the innovation previously was on offense. I think it's across the board: offense, defense, special teams. I think that the recruiting in this league is better overall, and I'm talking about 1 through 10. I just think it's a really competitive league, and I think that it's improving. And I'm excited about the direction of this league. I really am.
The second one from Bryson is a pretty fun one, and I know you don't get to do quite as many recruiting visits as you used to as an assistant. Just by rule, head coaches don't get to go on the road quite as much. But he says, additionally, unrelated question, what is your favorite area to physically visit when you recruit? Good food, weather, people, etc. Yeah,
so the answer to this question, most of the time head coaches recruit in December and January. Yeah. And so is you going to Florida is nice during December and January. And so the warm weather, I'll tell you an area that I really like, and I'm going right off the cuff on this one. And we're fortunate that we have, I think 5, maybe 6 players from this area right now, but Savannah, Georgia they have great food. The high school football there is improving. We've got some really strong inroads there. And we've got some talented guys on our roster, and they're talented young guys. But the Savannah, Georgia area is a great place to visit, and we've had a lot of success there.
It is, Coach. Those answers they score points with me. I live in Orlando, and we actually, my wife and I went on our Babymoon to Savannah, just a fairly short drive there up the road.
Babymoon, that's a new millennial term.
It is, yeah. It's like the last vacation before you really should probably stop traveling.
Did you give her the push present on the Babymoon?
No. So luckily, my best friend is married to her best friend, and he opted not to do the push present, and so I kind of had the precedent to avoid the push present, which was great. But we did go out on the Babymoon. So that
you could have gained points if you did the push present.
I should have. I should have. Maybe on number 2. So Bubba didn't put a location, but Bubba wants to know What are the top 3 books you have read that have had a positive impact on your life?
Yeah, I don't know about the top 3, but I'll tell you 3 books that have really made an impact in my thought process, how I go about structuring days, or in a little bit of how we go about structuring our program. And these 3: Slight Edge, Legacy, and Energy Bus. Those would be 3 books that I would recommend. Again, Slight Edge, Legacy, and then the Energy Bus.
Awesome. Slight Edge, Energy Bus. I've read Energy Bus. I haven't caught the other 2. All right. So Matt in Fairmont, we'll squeeze in a couple more here. We appreciate Coach being gracious with his time. Matt asks, I've got a 2-pronged question. What's been your message to your guys in dealing with such unusual circumstances? And do you think there's room for West Virginia football to actually come out ahead of the competition with some of its creative approaches? Obviously, don't have to go super in depth on this. I know we covered it some in some of the previous questions.
That's the hope, and I think that's probably I'm similar to a lot of head coaches, is you hope that your approach and how you approach this unprecedented time with your staff and with your players, you've done it better than the people you're playing against. Only time will tell. It's still a talent game, guys. I mean, that's, talent still overcomes a lot. And so our hope is that we've handled this in the best way possible. And we've done that by just doing the best we can with where we're at. And I do think our buy-in is high right now. And I think our guys have a lot of confidence. Now we got to translate that with a lot of hard work when they return here on the 15th.
Awesome. All right. So Matt from Morgantown has a question about facilities and the stadium. He says, with all the plan and ongoing construction for the football facility, looking into the future, what do you think or hope will be the next big project for you guys, assuming funding returns to normal following the COVID scare? And then also several people wanted to have an update on the scoreboard. So future projects and maybe a scoreboard update.
Yeah, sure. So I'm fired up about the renovation. This is something that was badly needed. I don't think it's really the first major renovation in maybe 17 years, is what I heard yesterday in a meeting. I'm not sure on the fact check on that, but that's what I was told in a meeting that I was in yesterday. It's been 17 years, and so it was much needed. I think it's going to bring us up at the minimum on par with some of the programs in our league, and it's going to put us ahead in several aspects of teams in our league. But it was much needed, and I'm fired up about it, and I appreciate the administration and the boosters that made it possible. And as far as the video, as far as the new video board, they're working on it. And I don't want to speak for our administration because they know a lot more of the ins and outs. I'm locked in on what's going on inside our building, not as locked in on what's going on with the video board. To my understanding, it is going to be ready for the opening of the season.
Great, Coach. You got time for a couple more for us here?
So was the part of it was part of that question too, and I got lost a little bit on the answer there. Was they were asking kind of what's next, right? Kind of
what's the next big one to come?
I think it's important we get a video board in the IPF and make that really multifunctional. We need to be able to host functions in the IPF. To do that, we need to get sound and a video board in there. I think long-term is we've got our press box. Press box needs to be upgraded. We need to find some solutions on premium seating just for some revenue funding, but that's probably a long-term project. I got time for about one more, and then I got to visit with people that can actually play because we got a virtual visit coming up.
All right, we'll get you out of here on this one. Nick from Franklin, Pennsylvania says, hey, there's obviously been an effort to welcome back and incorporate former players. Are any further or future plans for maybe a guy like Tavon Austin, since every single recruit seems to mention his highlight reel, which was pretty sick highlight reel?
His highlight reel is unbelievable, and he's one of the guys that really resonate and really opens that initial line of communication with some of the top receivers. And I think that we can recruit at West Virginia some of the elite receivers in the country, and I think he's a really big piece of it. We've had conversations. He's got a lot going on. These guys that and a lot of people have given of their time and stuff and really paid it forward with our players. And Tavon's a guy that I think feels passionately about West Virginia. And he performed at a high level. But also I think he's a new father and he's playing in the NFL, and that takes up a lot of time. So I'm careful not to ask too much of these guys. I really am. But he knows that he's welcome here anytime. I'd love to get him as involved as he wants to be. But that's true. That his highlight tape's as good as anybody's I've ever seen. Noah Devine's not too bad either. And so, but he and I hope he knows that. I mean, he gets us in the door with a lot of big time players.
Do you know the 3 freak athletes to come out of North Fort Myers High School, which is where Devine was from?
Now, who you got?
Deion Sanders, Javon Curse.
There you go.
And then Noel Devine. Yeah. Coach, really appreciate you joining us here on 24/7 Sports, and thanks to the earsports.com members for providing the questions today. Be sure to check out the video when it comes out, and thanks again, Coach.
No, I appreciate it, guys. Everybody that brought questions to the table, I appreciate it. Hopefully, you got them answered, and appreciate supporting our program.